Welcome to this deep dive all about power dynamics and the art of influence. We've got a lot to cover today, 10 PDFs actually that you sent us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a lot of different figures and stories from Louis XIV and Napoleon
Mm.
to a con man named Yellow Kid Weil, and even a hypnotist who said he could use the power of the moon.
Well, it sounds like we have our work cut out for us today. This collection really highlights how power dynamics can play out across different fields and time periods.
So I guess our mission today is to help you, the listener, understand how power works, how people use it, and how you can be more aware of the game, so to speak.
Yeah, it's not just about being in charge, right? It's about influence, persuasion, those more subtle things that affect how we interact with each other.
Definitely. And one thing that really stood out to me from these sources was how inheriting power, whether it's a throne or a family business or whatever, isn't always a good thing.
That's so true. We often think, oh, you're so lucky to just inherit all this power, but it's really more complicated than that.
Yeah, like Louis the 55th of France, he inherited a really prosperous France from his great-grandfather, Louis the 14th, the Sun King.
Right.
But during Louis the 50th's reign, things kind of went downhill. It seemed like the weight of his great-grandfather's legacy was too much for him.
Oh, yeah. He's the perfect example of, what do they call it? The curse of the successor. It can be really hard to make your own way when everyone's always comparing you to whoever came before.
Right.
Instead of trying new things, a successor might just try to keep things the same or copy what their predecessor did, and that's how things stagnate.
Makes sense. So how do you break free of that? The sources mention a few leaders who did manage to step out of their predecessors' shadows, like Alexander the Great.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Alexander.
he had to deal with the legacy of his father, Philip of Macedon, who was a pretty amazing leader himself.
Definitely. Alexander was very smart about it. He didn't just reject his father's legacy outright. Instead, he actually used it to fuel his own ambition. Like conquering Persia, which is something Philip wanted to do but never could, allowed Alexander to both build on his father's work and also do something big on his own.
That's like that story, the Gordian knot.
Oh, yeah.
Legend says whoever could untie this super complicated knot would rule all of Asia. But instead of trying to untie it, Alexander just took his sword and cut it in half.
What a power move, right?
Seriously.
Yeah.
It's a good lesson for everyone, not just kings and queens. The past can inspire us, but it shouldn't control our every move.
Exactly.
Sometimes you have to break away, to create your own path. It's about understanding the difference between honoring a legacy and being trapped by it.
That's such a good point. Instead of trying to do exactly what someone else did, we should take the best parts of that legacy and make it our own, something that reflects our vision and goals.
Right, make it your own. Now, this idea of legacy brings us to an interesting paradox from the sources. The art of seduction and power. And just to be clear, we're not talking about, tricking people. It's about understanding what people want and knowing how to, I guess, appeal to those desires.
Influence through connection and understanding, yeah.
Exactly. A great example of this is the story of Marie Mancini. She was the first love of Louis XIV.
Louis the 14th.
Yeah. People didn't consider her to be traditionally beautiful, but she totally captivated the young king. The sources say she did this by mirroring his ambitions, his dreams. They even call it the seducer's mirror.
The seducer's mirror, that's a good one. Basically, you're reflecting back the desires and aspirations of the person you want to influence.
Right.
You're not forcing anything on them. You connect with them by making them feel seen and understood.
But couldn't that be abused? Like, how do you use this mirror ethically, without being manipulative?
You have to be genuine and you have to have good intentions. The seducer's mirror isn't about making people do what you want against their will. It's about finding common ground, seeing their point of view and making your ideas attractive to them, to their values and goals.
So building actual rapport and trust, not just playing mind games?
Exactly. Think of it as really, really listening to someone, not just to the words, but trying to understand what's behind them, what are their needs and motivations.
Yeah, that makes sense. Seems especially useful if you're in a leadership role.
Oh, definitely.
Instead of just bossing your team around, you're trying to understand what each person wants and how that fits into the overall goal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When you understand your team's values and you can connect your vision to their aspirations, you get a much more engaged and motivated team.
Okay, so we've talked about the burden of inheritance and the importance of understanding and connecting with people's desires. Now, there's a kind of a darker side to power dynamics, the dangers of appearing superior.
Right. History's full of examples of how showing off your superiority can really backfire, from ancient Greece to the art world.
The sources have a lot of cautionary tales, yeah.
Definitely.
Like in ancient Athens, they had this thing called ostracism, where citizens could vote to kick anyone out who they thought was dangerous.
Oh, yeah, ostracism.
And it wasn't always like tyrants or criminals who got targeted. Often, it was people who were seen as too arrogant, too successful, just too out of touch.
People like Aristides.
Oh, right.
He was
Aristides.
a general, a big part of defeating the Persians at Marathon. He was known for being fair. They even called him the Just.
Yeah, the
But
just.
even him, the Athenians voted to banish him. Can you believe that?
Why? He seemed like a good guy.
Well, even though he accomplished so much, people thought he was too arrogant, too self-righteous. They felt threatened by him, resented him because they thought he was better than them.
So it wasn't enough to be good or successful. He had to manage how people saw him.
Exactly. Power isn't just about what you do, it's about how you make people feel.
That's something to keep in mind even today.
Oh, yeah.
Think about those colleagues who are always bragging or putting others down. It doesn't usually end well for them, does it?
No, not at all. Real power doesn't need to announce itself, you know. Real influence comes from being humble, respectful, and making people feel valued.
Right. And that brings us to a pretty interesting character from the sources, a guy named Yellow Kid Weil, a real master of deception.
Ah, Yellow Kid Weil. He knew how to play the game. He understood that one of the best ways to make people comfortable was to seem less intelligent than them, less knowledgeable, less of a threat.
He pulled this off perfectly with one of his biggest cons. He created a fake bank.
Oh, fake pain.
Yeah, in Muncie, Indiana. It looked just like a real bank, with tellers and security guards, the whole 9 yards.
Clever.
And he used this fake bank to prey on people's greed, their need to feel smarter than everyone else. He acted all naive and trusting, which made them underestimate him and let their guard down.
Classic con.
Right. But intentionally appearing less intelligent, that seems a little risky, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you could end up looking insincere or even insulting.
Oh, for sure. There's a delicate balance. You have to use this tactic carefully and authentically. It's not about actually being deceptive. It's more about picking your battles.
Okay.
Sometimes you let the other person think they have the upper hand.
Like a strategic retreat, you step back to get a better view of the battlefield.
Exactly. Sometimes observing and listening are more powerful than trying to dominate.
That seems really helpful, especially in negotiations.
Oh,
Right?
absolutely.
Like asking questions that seem naive could make the other person give away more information than they meant to.
You got it. It can give you valuable insights into how they're thinking, maybe even give you an advantage.
This whole playing dumb thing is fascinating. Now, I'm also curious about the power of groups, like how crowds work and what makes cults so alluring.
Yeah, that's where individual behavior can really change under the influence of a group. The sources talk about how our ability to think critically gets affected in those settings.
Right. Like Franz Mesmer, the hypnotist from the 18th century.
Oh, yes.
His shows were famous, with music and dim lights and his assistants in these crazy costumes.
He was all about spectacle. He understood how collective energy works, how people in a group can become more suggestible. He created a sense of awe and wonder.
Yeah, and people really thought he had magical healing powers.
Right. And it's a reminder that when you're part of a group, especially one that's highly emotional, you can lose your ability to think for yourself.
It's kind of scary how easily we can be swayed in those situations.
Definitely raises questions about how we stay true to ourselves, especially in environments where groupthink is strong.
The sources even compare this to what happens on social media.
Interesting comparison.
Yeah, like how information, even false information, can spread so quickly online, all fueled by emotion.
Yeah, just like Mesmer used. Social media can create these echo chambers where you only hear what you already believe, which makes it harder to think critically.
So we really need to be careful and question what we see online, especially when it comes to power dynamics.
Absolutely. We need to think for ourselves, look for different perspectives, and be willing to challenge our own assumptions, especially online.
Definitely. Speaking of being careful, the sources highlight another big thing about power dynamics: timing. It's not just what you do, but when you do it.
Timing is everything. Knowing when to act, when to wait, when to make your move.
It can make the difference between success and failure.
For sure.
One example that really shows this is the story of Queen Tomyris of the Massagetæ and her conflict with Cyrus the Great, the Emperor of Persia.
Ah, Cyrus, he was known for his military skills.
Yeah, but Tomyris, she was smart. She knew that even the strongest leaders have weaknesses you can exploit if you strike at the right time.
She played the long game.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She made Cyrus think he had won. She let him and his troops celebrate.
Oh, wow.
But it was all a trap. She was just waiting for the perfect moment to strike back.
And when she did,
Her forces crushed the Persian army. Cyrus was killed.
it's an incredible story. It shows how powerful patience and strategic timing can be. You can never underestimate your opponent.
And this applies to so much more than just war. Think about negotiations, career moves, even personal relationships. Knowing when to make your move is crucial.
Absolutely. It's about reading the situation, knowing what's going on, and waiting for the moment when you'll have the biggest impact.
This has been so insightful. I feel like we've uncovered so much about power dynamics already, and we've only just scratched the surface.
We have a lot more to unpack from these sources. There's so much more to learn and discuss about how power works in the world.
Definitely. But for now, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more insights from these fascinating sources you sent us.
Sounds good. You know, it's amazing how all these different stories, kings and queens, con men, hypnotists, they all show us something different about power.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And it shows how power dynamics aren't limited to just one area or time period. They're happening all around us, whether we see them or not.
Exactly. And the more we learn about these dynamics, the better we'll be at navigating them.
Earlier, you mentioned the seducer's mirror, this idea of reflecting back someone's desires.
Right.
Powerful tactic, but it needs to be done carefully.
Yeah.
There's a fine line between using it ethically to connect with someone and just manipulating them, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It comes down to your intention. Are you really trying to understand the other person, or are you just trying to use them?
So it's about having integrity, even
Yeah.
when you're using these like subtle tactics.
Exactly. You got to be genuine. You're trying to build a real relationship based on trust and mutual understanding.
If you use the seducer's mirror to trick people or be dishonest, it's going to
Mhm.
backfire.
Oh, yeah, big time.
It reminds me of that concept from one of the sources. Sometimes it's actually better to appear less intelligent, to play the naive
Oh,
fool.
yes. The playing dumb strategy.
Yeah,
We usually associate that with con artists like Yellow Kid Weil,
right.
but it can be used ethically too.
But why would anyone intentionally try to seem less intelligent? Doesn't that seem counterintuitive?
It can actually be really disarming. When people think they're smarter than you, they tend to let their guard down.
Oh, so they underestimate you, and that gives you an advantage.
Exactly. It's all about choosing your battles carefully. Sometimes you're better off letting the other person think they have the upper hand.
Kind of like mental jujitsu, using your opponent's strength against them.
Exactly that. And like in a negotiation, if you act a little clueless, the other person might explain things too much and give away information they didn't mean to.
Okay, I can see that. But how do you play dumb without sounding, I don't know, insincere or like you're talking down to someone?
That's the tricky part. You have to be subtle and genuine. Ask questions that seem sincere. Be curious. Be willing to learn from the other person.
So you're showing humility. You really want to understand their perspective.
Exactly. It's not about lying. It's about making the other person feel comfortable enough to share their thoughts and ideas.
This plain dumb thing really shows how important the psychological side of power dynamics is. It's not just about strategy. It's about understanding how people think.
You got it. If you want to be good at navigating power dynamics, you got to be a student of human nature. You got to know what makes people tick, what they're afraid of, what they want.
And the sources talk about how our behavior changes when we're in groups, like with Franz Mesmer and his hypnosis shows.
Oh, Mesmer was a master of crowd psychology. Music, lighting, those costumes.
Yeah, the whole atmosphere was designed to make people more suggestible,
He knew how to create a sense of awe, a feeling of wonder.
and people bought into it. They really believe he had these magical healing powers.
Right. It shows how easily our critical thinking can disappear when we're in a group, especially a group experiencing strong emotions.
To be honest, it's a little scary how easily we can be influenced in those situations.
It makes you question, how much control we really have over our own thoughts and actions in those situations.
Definitely. But it also shows how important self-awareness is.
Right.
If we understand how our own minds work, we're less likely to be manipulated.
We can make better choices, even in difficult situations.
All this talk about crowd psychology makes the sources look at cults even more fascinating.
It really is chilling how people get sucked into these groups and lose their individuality and critical thinking.
The sources say that cults use a lot of the same tactics as Mesmer did in his shows.
Right, creating a sense of community, fulfilling emotional needs, breaking down personal boundaries.
So it's like they slowly brainwash you, replacing your own thoughts with the group's ideology.
Exactly. And it shows why it's so important to think for yourself, question everything, and be skeptical, especially when you're dealing with groups that demand total obedience.
The sources also connect these examples of crowd psychology to the world of social media.
Oh, that's a really interesting connection.
Yeah, like how rumors and conspiracy theories can spread so fast online, driven by emotion.
Right, that same emotional contagion that Mesmer was so good at using. Social media can amplify that, creating these echo chambers where you only see what you already believe.
Yeah, it makes you realize how important it is to be careful about what you believe online, to always double check and get different
We
viewpoints.
need to be critical thinkers now more than ever with so much information coming at us all the time.
Absolutely. Now, the sources also highlight another really important aspect of power dynamics: timing.
Timing is everything. It's not just about what you do, but when you do it.
Knowing when to act, when to hold back, when to make your move, that can make all the difference.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing the right moment when your actions will have the biggest impact.
We see this perfectly in the story of Queen Tamiris and Cyrus the Great. She waited for the perfect moment to strike, and that's how she won.
She was so patient, she planned everything out, and she knew exactly when to exploit Cyrus's weakness.
It's like that idea from one of the sources, acting like a snake charmer.
Oh, I like that
The
analogy.
snake charmer doesn't force the snake to do anything. They use music and subtle movements to get the snake's attention, to hypnotize it almost.
And once the snake is in a trance, the charmer can control it completely.
That's like strategic timing and influence, knowing when to exert your power.
You got to understand the rhythm of the situation, how power is flowing back and forth, and then make your move at just the right time.
All this talk about timing and influence makes me wonder, are we all just pawns in some big power game, being manipulated without even knowing it?
That's a deep question. I wouldn't say we're all just pawns, but I do think we're always dealing with power dynamics, whether we realize it or not.
So we need to become aware of the game, learn the rules, and come up with our own strategies for playing it in a way that's both effective and ethical.
Right. And remember, power isn't always about dominating or controlling others.
Okay.
It can also be about working together, persuading others, and inspiring them to achieve common goals.
The sources really emphasize that power is all about influence.
Yes, it's about shaping how things turn out, getting people to see your point of view, and motivating them to act.
And that influence can be used for good or bad. It all comes down to our intentions and how we use the knowledge we have.
It's a big responsibility to use our understanding of power dynamics wisely, ethically, and to benefit ourselves and others.
One of the themes that keeps coming up in the sources is the importance of understanding human psychology.
Absolutely. If we want to master the game of power, we have to become students of human nature.
We need to know what drives people, what their fears and desires are, and how they respond to different forms of persuasion.
The more we know about people, the better we'll be at navigating these complex power dynamics.
The sources are full of examples of historical figures who were experts at reading people and adjusting their strategies.
Like Marie Mancini with her subtle charm, or Alexander the Great with his bold moves.
Yeah.
They knew that power wasn't just about brute force, it was about understanding people and tailoring your approach to each situation.
It's amazing to see how these principles apply to so many different areas: politics, business, art, even our personal relationships.
It suggests that power dynamics are everywhere. We're always negotiating them, whether we're aware of it or not.
The sources really drive home the point that power is fluid. You don't possess it, you cultivate it.
It's always changing. The people who are best at using power are the ones who can adapt, who can see those changes coming, and adjust their strategies accordingly.
This deep dive has really changed how I think about power. It's
Ooh.
so much more complicated than I thought.
It really is, and the more we understand it, the better we'll be at dealing with its challenges and using it to our advantage.
You know, with all this talk about strategy and influence, what about when you feel powerless? Like, what can you do when you're up against someone or something way more powerful than you?
That feeling powerless, it's something we all experience at some point, right? I think the first thing is to acknowledge those feelings, but also remember, even then, you're not completely helpless.
So even when it seems like there's nothing you can do, you still have options.
Yeah, absolutely. You could walk away, you could find allies, get support from others, or use what you now know about power dynamics to try and even the playing field, even if it's in subtle ways.
So it's about remembering that you always have some control over how you react, how you engage or don't engage with the situation.
Exactly. Focus on what you can control. Your mindset, your actions, how you choose to see the situation.
Okay, that's helpful.
Fair.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some key things our listeners can take away and use in their own lives?
For me, the biggest one is self-awareness. When you understand your own motivations, your strengths, weaknesses, That gives you a real edge in navigating these power dynamics.
It's like knowing yourself helps you see how others might try to influence you, so you can play to your strengths instead of falling into their traps.
Yeah, that's it. Self-awareness is the key to making smart, strategic choices instead of just reacting emotionally.
The sources also talk a lot about understanding other people's motivations.
Oh, definitely. We need to be students of human nature, you know? Pay attention to what drives people, what their fears are, their desires, how they react to different approaches.
Like you're a detective of human behavior, try and figure out what makes people tick.
Haha, exactly.
Yeah.
And the better you understand the people you're dealing with, the better you'll be at communicating, building relationships, and navigating all those power struggles.
One thing that really stood out to me was that there's no one right way to deal with power dynamics. The sources really emphasize adapting your strategy to each situation.
That's so important. What works in one situation might backfire completely in another.
So you got to be flexible, read the room, and change your approach depending on who you're dealing with and what's going on.
And be willing to experiment, try different things, and see what works.
The sources also mention something I think we often forget when we talk about power: authenticity.
Being genuine, yeah, that's crucial. Real power doesn't come from pretending or wearing a mask.
It's about being true to yourself.
Exactly. People can spot a fake, and that just destroys trust.
Right. Authenticity is key to building strong relationships and using influence in a way that's both effective and ethical.
Well said.
This deep dive has seriously changed how I think about power. It's so much more than just being in charge. It's everywhere.
It really is. It's a dynamic force that affects everything, our interactions, our relationships, even how we think about ourselves.
The sources really highlight that power isn't something you have, it's something you develop by understanding yourself, your relationships, and the world around you.
And it's a constant learning process, you know? The more we learn about power dynamics, the better we can navigate them and use that knowledge to our advantage.
We've learned so much today, from dealing with the legacy of our predecessors to the art of persuasion and how crowds work. Any final thoughts for our listeners?
I'd say keep exploring these ideas, keep questioning, keep observing, and keep learning about how power works in your own life and in the world.
It's been an incredible journey, and I definitely have a whole new understanding of how power shapes everything. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of power dynamics. It's been fascinating.
My pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring and keep diving deep.